Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 back again with some more lore. In today's video, boys and gals, we're taking a look at something very unique, a little controversial, but in my opinion, bloody fantastic. Today we're going to be talking about the Risen, 40k's newest Imperial faction, but more specifically, just what exactly the hell are they? We don't know what they were before when they were the Fallen, we don't know what they are now. Well, we do know, but I'm saying that if you're watching this video, you probably don't know. But I know something of it, so I'm gonna do that. But we're gonna talk about what exactly the Fallen are, their origins, what they're doing now, and what the future will belie for these new Risen Dark Angels, and whether or not Asmodai is going to start a civil war, because he might. So, strap on in, buckle up, grab yourself a snack, and let's get crack-a-lackin' on with today's video. So, before we can talk about the Risen proper, we need to first talk about how they became the Fallen. And to do that, like all things in Warhammer 40k, and with Space Marines and the Imperium, and pretty much everything really, I already said that, we're going to be talking about the Heresy. More specifically, the end of the Heresy. You see, when the Lion made his legion, he had a group of knights known as the Order. And he had his father, who was the leader, his adoptive father, mind you, who was known as Luther. You see, Luther would be elevated into a pseudo-space marine, and he would continue to serve as the first captain. However, there would be a fallout, which would culminate in the Siege of Sarosh, in which the Saroshi leader managed to get a nuke aboard the ship. Now, it's a little iffy on what exactly happened, but it's believed that Luther allowed the nuke aboard the ship, realized that was a dumbass move, and then did everything he could to chuck it out with the help of a librarian known as Zariel. Now the Lion, being the Lion, he only saw left and right, and in this case he only saw that Luther had allowed a nuke aboard the ship. So he grabbed him as well as 500 other Dark Angels. We don't exactly know how they were chosen, but we assume they had some allegiance to Luther or maybe a connection to the Order, and they were sent back to Caliban, the Dark Angels' home world. And they were meant to oversee recruitment. But you gotta understand, these are the Dark Angels, Knights. And anyone who knows anything about Knights, being sent away from a battlefield to do backline stuff is the ultimate form of spite. And as the decades went by, Luther eventually would get really annoyed. The fact that he was being robbed of all his glory. Because remember, the Dark Angels are the uncrowned princes, the first legion. They're doing a bunch of crazy shit. They're killing people left and right. They're claiming accolades and glory. It's really good. So, Luther, being a super old-fashioned literal knight, seeing that he was being robbed of glory from his adoptive son, he got a little pissy. So that began to fester and ferment. So then, you fast forward back to the end of the Scouring. The Siege of Terror has ended, the Scouring is in swing, and the Lion and his legion make it way back to Caliban. However, when they get there, they are then fired upon by the Dark Angels. The Lion then pulls his boys back and tries to find out exactly what happened. For one reason or another, he comes to the conclusion that Luther had given in to chaos, and that all the Dark Angels on Caliban had given in to chaos, and that they needed to be destroyed. Mind you, he didn't really confirm this. This was very much a Lion acting on impulse because, loyalty is its own reward type shit. So, with that happening, the Lion then bombards the ever-living fuck of the planet, basically destroys it, and then launches a strike force, where he meets with Luther. And they duel. And for the most part, they're relatively equal. Until, of course, Luther collapses out of exhaustion because, Primarch. However, the Lion can't kill his dad. For as much of an asshole the Lion is, this was still his dad. And he still loved him. Luther, on the other hand, launched a massive psychic attack. And he was just about to kill the Lion. However, at the very moment, he realized that he was about to kill his adoptive son. And then he was like, no. He stopped immediately and cried out in anguish. And the Chaos Gods, who had given Luther this power, they got really pissy. And what did they do? They launched a gigantic warp storm and swallowed up basically almost all of Caliban, as well as all of the Dark Angels that were on Caliban. Now, it wasn't just the original 500, but remember, any and all who they'd been recruited and who stayed on the planet with them to serve as garrison. So, in the aftermath of this all of the Fallen have been yeeted off into God knows where. The Dark Angels are left with only one piece of their home known as the Rock, and Lion is AFK. According to Luther, the Watchers in the Dark took him to some secret place so that he could be healed from the psychic wounds, which we would later find out to be known as the pocket dimension known as the Forest, or whatever the Forest is. I think it's a pocket dimension, but it's some type of shenaniganery. And the remaining Dark Angels, they don't have anyone to talk to, they don't have anyone to question, so they decide that they're going to follow in their dad's footsteps and follow his final orders. They then take the name the Unforgiven, and they vow to erase this stain that seemingly had laid their father low, for the glory of the Dark Angels and the Lion himself. And that's basically the story that we had up until the Risen. But few minor details here. We do know that Luther did indeed fall to chaos in some fashion. However, he was not completely against the Lion. Also, we don't know if everyone on the Rock itself and Caliban fell into chaos. However, given what happened with the Risen, we know that's probably not the case. Also, this basically sends the Dark Angels down their whole paranoia path. You see, the Dark Angels were under the assumption that the line was correct, that every single Fallen was an irredeemable Chaos Marauder. However, in actuality, that was far different from the story. But, fast forward about 10,000 or so years, and the Fallen have been a pain in the ass to the Dark Angels, and the Dark Angels have become a pain in the ass to the Imperium. If the Dark Angels ever got a whisper of the Fallen, they would drop literally everything, allies, campaigns, whatever it is, and yoink over there to go and snag them. Case in point, we have the Siege of Frax, in which case the Dark Angels quite literally didn't help at all, and in fact made a mess and lost several hundred Marines because, Dark Angel stuff. So, basically, the Lion wakes up and he's in the forest, and then he finds himself on a planet. He then meets the first of these so-called Fallen, known as Zabriel, and it's here that the Lion finds out exactly what has been happening. That he's been gone for about 10,000 years, and that everything is just messed up. And the Lion and Zabriel then have a conversation. From there, Zabriel ends up talking to the Lion, and it's here that the Lion shows his newfound maturity. He realizes during the scouring of Caliban, he assumed that all of his boys were already fallen and they were evil and they were lost. But that was not the case. Zabriel was just misguided. For whatever reason, he wondered if the Lion was truly loyal, and vice versa. However, when they actually sit down and talk, Zabriel ends up breaking down into tears, realizing that it was all for naught. All the blood, all the slaughter, all of the murder, it was just a misunderstanding, and he is grief-stricken by the idea that this was all just a big misunderstanding that caused him to kill his kin. And we see that throughout the entirety of every single one of the interactions with every single new Risen, it's the same spiel. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We also see that there are indeed some Fallen who have fully turned into chaos. One particular example that we have is what is known as the 10,000-Eyed Warband. And of course the Lion, seeing that, decides time to bring back that old First Legion special, War Crimes, a la 30k, and decides to kill them all. And he does indeed kill them all. From there, the Lion then sets about refounding his legion, and he establishes something known as the Lion Protectorate. He calls upon every single son of the Lion, whether he be Fallen, Risen, Original Dark Angel, or Successor Chapter, and he wants to restore his legion. He doesn't want to rule, he doesn't want to guide, he simply wants to be the bastion of defiance, to serve and protect the realm. And that's where the story leaves off as is. But now that you have the TLDR and now that you're caught up on what exactly the Risen are, let's answer the question, what exactly are the Risen? And to answer that, we need to answer what exactly are the Fallen. Because throughout everything, we have had various different iterations of the Fallen. Some are Chaos Warbands, some are just ordinary Space Marines, some are Renegades, some are really good guys, some are just confusing, some apparently are 10,000 years old, some are warp-based. It really is just rather confusing at the end of the day. So what exactly are they? The answer is yes. What you need to understand specifically is what exactly happened with the Warp Storm. When Caliban was destroyed, the Chaos God sent a warp storm, and that did all the destroying. However, it scattered them throughout the galaxy, but not just in terms of the galaxy, but also in terms of time. The warp is a tricky place, so it twisted and changed and chucked them everywhere. We have some Space Marines that emerged only a few days after, we have some that emerged several thousand years after. Zabriel, for instance, emerged only 400 years earlier, and he had been hiding from his quote-unquote little brothers ever since. This is a very, very important fact, because it gives us something that we didn't know before, that the Fallen can indeed be 30k era Dark Angels. Now, for those of you who don't know, 30k Space Marines are significantly different from 40k Space Marines, not only in terms of temperament, but also in terms of quality. The gene seed of the Space Marines has deteriorated to some degree, mainly because during 30k it went from creating the best of the best to making Inductii, which had to come out as quickly as it can to replace the losses. Hence that's why the Imperial Fist lost to their Blecher's Gland. However, we now know that because of this, it has been confirmed that there are indeed groups of Space Marines who are literally Crusade-era veterans. Zabriel himself is a Terran-born veteran from the Uncrowned Princes. This is huge for us. It means that for the first time pretty much ever, unless you count the induction of some Primarch Marines, we have actual, honest to God, firstborn, Great Crusade Horus Heresy era veteran Space Marines serving in modern day 40k. That is a massive change, beyond massive. Not only because of what it represents, moreover, the sheer amount of skill, the firepower, as well as the technology that was there means that these fellas, they're going to be packing some serious heat. Also, we get to see the Great Crusade in 40k. Some people may hate that. Me personally, I love that shit. So while we do have these Great Crusade era veterans, we also have the other alternative, the Chaos Spawn, or more specifically the Chaos Tainted Warbands. As I mentioned before, the Lion himself kills a warband known as the 10,000 Year Eyes. or something like that. And during this time, we see that these are proper Chaos Marines, wholly given into the corrupting forces of Chaos, completely have their lives extended, full T, Chaos Corruption, Chaos Mutation, Chaos Sorcery, they're Chaos Marines, one in the same. Except Dark Angel flavored, so think Mordred from King Arthur's Legends. And of course we have the third path. Now, if you don't like good and you don't like bad, you'd always say, fuck it, I'm gonna make my own with blackjack and hookers, baby. And then we have the third path, that being the Renegade. Many of the Fallen didn't side with Chaos, and they sure as hell didn't like the Imperium, so they went on their own. They became their own lords of systems, they became pirates, they became raiders, they became whatever they wanted. You have some Fallen who are quite literally piratical raiders no better than Dark Eldar or whatever, just evil bastards. But in the same vein, you had some Fallen which took governance of a system, they took governance of a world, and they became true noble knights to do what their father had not, to do what Luther had not, and they decided that they would be the true paragons of what the First Legion should be. Now, of course, we don't have any exact stories of them, but considering the nature of it, it opens up to a variety of storytelling possibilities. Now that we have been confirmed that the warp storm spat them across space and time, we now know that there is a chance that, hell, maybe a company of Dark Angels was there during the Age of Apostasy. Maybe they saved a planet from like an orc war or something, and they became its rulers, and now it's just some far-flung colony. It just opens up such an amazing variety of possibilities, and I love that in my storytelling. So we covered these three different paths, and these are generally one of the three they can fall into, but I want to talk about something just a little bit more specifically, the forest. We know that the Lion can enter the forest, but we know he's not the only one. We see both the Risen as well as the Chaos Space Marines entering into the same pocket dimension. Now, I've been calling it a pocket dimension, and I refer to it as a pocket dimension, because we know the Lion can do something called forest walking, which is kind of like a teleportation type deal, right? He can go from one point to another, pretty simple. But my question is, what exactly is the forest? And how does it affect the Dark Angels? Because the one thing that every single person who's been in the forest so far, they share the lineage of the Lion. Now that is a very important detail. I believe, personally, that the forest is a remnant of Caliban. Caliban was known as Deathworld, but not because of its flora, because of its fauna. The great beasts and the mighty forests of Caliban were said to be mythical Arthurian nightmare realms, home only to demons, damnation, and death. And it was the mighty knights of the Order who were meant to save the population and bring forth justice and peace where there was none. To say that Caliban was a magical place would be saying that the sun is bright. There is 100% warp fuckery going on there. We know for a fact that some of the beasts were indeed mutated by the warp, and a lot of people thought that there was some type of chaos abomination. But with this aspect of the forest being shown to us, I hypothesize that Caliban is not directly connected to the warp, but rather to the forest. My theory is that the forest is a remnant of the warp, uncorrupted, for one reason or another, and that it existed through Caliban. Because remember, the warp wasn't always space hell. Right, and the warp was broken during the War in Heaven and the Birth of Slash. So, it's very possible though, that one chunk of the warp managed to break off and exist in its own mini-dimension. Because we know in the warp, several dimensions can exist. There's Vashdor's Workshop, there's Khorne's Brass Realm, there's Nurgle's Gardens, Sinesh's Palace of Pleasure, Tzeentch's Library, etc. So, it's not so far-fetched to say that a part of the warp broke off and attached itself to Caliban. Caliban was its portal, its link to the material world. It would also explain the Watchers in the Dark, how they're a pseudo-warp-based entity, and that explains why they're so good against anti-psychic stuff, because they themselves come from the psychic realm, so they know how to fight fire with fire. Also, it would make sense that when Luther was captured, he said that the Watchers took him somewhere safe to heal, where safer than Caliban's own version of heaven. But then that begs the question, if the forest is indeed an uncorrupted version of the warp, or a part of the warp, and it was indeed connected to Caliban, how the hell does the Lion and his gene sons have access to it? Well, there comes another theory. You see, the Lion never talks about his first years in the forest. For one reason or another, he just never mentions them. So, my theory is that when the Lion entered into the forest, he had to fight off a variety of creatures, but he also had to live in the forest. My idea is that the forest, being a warp realm, has a type of pseudo-conscience. It depends, right? Some are more alive than others, but it has some type of sentience, even if it's minor. I believe that the forest deemed the Lion worthy. The forest deemed him an acceptable avatar, an acceptable host, an acceptable champion, whatever you want to call it. It liked him. End of story. So, it allowed him to connect to the forest. And since the Lion is able to connect to the forest, he can translate to that on his own will. Hence why when he was damaged, the Watchers in the Dark took him there, and that kind of activated his abilities within there. My idea is that since the lion is doing that, all of his gene sires, every single one of them, fallen and risen alike, are able to access the same pocket dimension. Because of the lion's experiences with the forest, because of his abilities as a Primarch, the forest has genetically accepted his genetic material. Thus, any and all who bear said legacy can enter on his behalf or on behalf of the forest, and technically, they could use that as their own mini dimension. Now, this is getting a little bit out of pocket, a little bit, but it's one of those things, so it's like, we don't know exactly what happened to the lion, we don't know exactly what the forest is, so this is a cool idea. Also, it'd be very interesting, because that means there's a part of the warp which Chaos has no foothold. The only other option would be the City of Dust, which is apparently the Emperor's version of his own Chaos realm, but whereas this has some basis of grounding, that is just pure pie in the sky, 100%. We don't know. It's an idea of an idea, but literally nothing to go off it. But that means that the forest is home only to the Dark Angels. Now granted, that means that Chaos Dark Angels can indeed enter it, but no Chaos entity can. Meaning that if the Dark Angels get rid of all the Chaos Dark Angels, which they've been trying to do for God Almighty knows how long, you will have a base in the warp, untouched by Chaos, exclusive to the loyal Sons of the Lion. You know, looking on it and going on about it, many people have likened the Lion unto a type of Big E-like character. He's much more mature, much more stable, less grumpy, less murder-happy, and he tries to act with more of a diplomatic, charismatic touch, as much as it does kill him to do so. And I like that idea, because looking at it, and looking at everything that's been going on, we see that now the lion is indeed trying to be more of a mature person, but also he's handling things different. And the Emperor wanted our own pocket dimension. He wanted the webway for us. So personally, I find it rather poetic, in that as the lion becomes a pseudo-type of Biggie or becoming more like him, he also gains his own pocket dimension for just his sons, for just humanity to live in. Now granted, of course, there is the issue of getting rid of all the Chaos Bastards, but you know, that's Warhammer 40k. It's a very interesting point to me, because then that means that, like, what does the future holds? The Risen are returning, and the Lion is returning. The Legion is being reformed. Now, the next thing I'm going to say, it's going to be really crazy, but bear with me, bear with your boy, right? If the forest is indeed connected to the warp in some way, shape or form, right? Which it might not be, okay? But if it is, and the lion restores the Legion and he fortifies the forest, if he's able to, he could get a staging ground to assault the literal warp itself. We know from the interactions with Biggie as well as Gilliman that the Imperium is very much capable of striking into the warp and fucking shit up. Well, the Emperor specifically, but you know, the Lion has made it abundantly clear. He wants not to be a leader, not to be a regent, not to be a lord. He wants to be a warrior, a general. So what if the Lion was like, right, I'm going to take my Legion and I'm going to invade hell? Because that is a very Lion thing to do. If the Lion restores even half the Dark Angels, 100,000 Space Marines, under his direct leadership, and he builds them in a force in the forest. He takes 100,000 boys, goes in the forest, and he spends however many years it may be reforming them. And we don't know how time works in the forest. So maybe he could spend, like, I don't know, 100 years training his boys, and in reality it's only going to be like a year in real time. We don't really know. But what could end up happening is that when the lion re-emerges from the forest, he will have at his command a full legion, trained and proper, removed of all the rubbish from 10,000 years, and he could then launch a campaign into chaos itself. Gilliman will be the shield, the lion will be the sword. Gilliman will protect the Imperium, whilst the lion doesn't go for Chaos Hell planets. No, he goes quite literally for Nurgle's Garden to do what Dad did. Again, I'm just saying, it would fit the Dark Angels so incredibly poetic to have a legion of knights venture forth into hell to slay demons. Also, that just sounds fucking badass to me, my guy. I adore that wholeheartedly. I want that now, because it's cool. You tell me that that isn't cool. Dark Angels going into hell to fight demons. That is base and that is badass, and goddammit do I love the idea of that. So me personally, that's what I do, but understand that Lost Theory is a bit of pie in the sky. It's not a bit pie in the sky, it's really out there, but it would be cool. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down below, what do you guys think about my theory? Do you guys think that the forest is indeed part of the warp? Do you guys think that the Risen and the Dark Angels will combine together? Do you think there'll be another civil war again? And what do you think about the pie in the high sky idea about the Dark Angels leading an invasion of chaos through the forest? I want that to happen? Probably won't, but goddammit do I want it. But anyway, I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and an even bigger thank you to my members. Shout out to our brand new member, Mr. Bullwin, who joined at the corporal tier. Thank you, sir, for your continued support and patronage, and welcome to the core. Big shout out to my lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Madra of the Void. Big shout out to my sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, and Mr. Corns Butcher. And shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Muslons, Mr. Ivan_SBW, and Mr. Michael Hayeda. Thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. It means the absolute world to me. If you want to join these awesome peeps, sign up with our memberships, you get early access to these videos, behind the scenes stuff, hand in making the video, and if you sign up with the captain tier, you get a special video request all on your own. But remember, there's always be free, and your boy will love you, no matter what. Mwah! Yes, I will. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank y'all all so very much for watching. May say to stay loyal out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers! I want the lion to crusade into hell.